Hello everyone, welcome back to another Doctor Who Ramble. Aren't the weeks just flying by? I can't believe we're already at episode 4. We're halfway through season 2 now, which is mental. And yeah, today we are talking about Lucky Day, which was written by Pete McTeague, who previously wrote Kablam in series 11. And he also co-wrote Praxeus, I think with Chris Chibnall, but he certainly co-wrote Praxeus in series 12. I really enjoyed this episode. I thought it was really good. I don't think it reached the heights of like Lux or The Well for me. But I think I prefer it to the opener. Maybe not. I probably more like consistently enjoyed the Robot Revolution, but I think this did have higher highs than the opener did. So we'll talk about it. We'll get into some more details. But either way, we've had 4 really strong episodes in a row this season so far. I'm getting more and more nervous about, the finale, and is it all going to come together in a decent way? God, I hope so. It's been like 7-8 hours since I've watched it, because I've been out today, so I'm not coming to things as fresh as I have done with the other episodes, but what can you do? This, I thought, was another really strong episode. I like that at the midpoint of the season we've had a very, this is setting up the finale-esque episode. I think it's safe to say we've got a few answers about the overall mysteries, which I'm really happy about. Just show some good pacing, I think, for the season. So we start off in 2007 and the Doctor and Belinda. I missed Belinda this episode, I must say. I think that's testament to the character, how she's written and how Verada performs Belinda's character, that I really missed her after this opening scene. I'm glad we did get a bit more of the Doctor near the end in a brilliant scene. But yeah, I did miss Belinda, so just throwing that out there. But they land in 2007, they're continuing their quest to, try and get Belinda home. It's nice to kind of get, I guess, sort of, well, we're just shown it rather than, explained. But with The Well last week, I'm kind of like, so as the Earth and humankind's just been completely removed from existence entirely, like it never happened, or did something happen and at the point in The Well, because it's obviously so far ahead in the future, it's just been so long, Earth and humanity has been forgotten about and their destruction's been forgotten about. And I think that seems to be the case because they have now landed on Earth. Because I was kind of wondering, like, why don't they just go, before this fateful day that they think things are going to go horribly wrong that they can't get back to? Have they even tried that? Just a line or two to explain that they tried it and it didn't work would have been nice, but I guess we're not really delving into that. But, they can get to Earth prior to that date, so I guess that's sort of a question of mine answered. So that's good. And yeah, they do what they need to do with their little device thingy. And they bump into a young Conrad. The older version, of course, played by Jonah Hauer-King in this episode, who was Prince Eric in the live-action Little Mermaid remake, which I thought was really good. He's also going to be in the I Know What You Did Last Summer, the new I Know What You Did Last Summer film. He's one of the main characters in that. Certainly plays an interesting character in this, who I have no doubt we'll be seeing again in the finale, given, some of the things he was saying near the end about, I don't accept your reality, Doctor. I disregard it. And we know the finale's called The Reality War, so, bit on the nose with that line. I feel he might as well have stared down the camera like Mrs. Flood, being like, I'm back in the finale because it's called The Reality War and I'm mentioning reality. But, that's kind of, I guess, what this era goes for sometimes. But yeah, they meet a young Conrad, and at first I'm like, oh no, it's Love and Monsters 2.0. What are they doing? They can't be doing this. But, Conrad's mum is abusive, seemingly. And I think Conrad's kind of shown a bit of attention for maybe the first time in a long time, maybe just ever, and made to feel a bit important. He gets the little, he gets to keep the coin and everything like that. And, off the Doctor and Belinda go. And it seems that Conrad's, life has changed its course and gone down a entire trajectory from meeting the Doctor in this way. So, very Love and Monsters-esque in a way. You've had a sighting of the Doctor and you're kind of obsessed. But I do like that they changed this up, and it's kind of like, what if, they would meet the Doctor and they're not necessarily inspired by him, but they reject him. and delving into that. I do think there's a bit of like inconsistency with that whole thing, because I'm like, so did he believe that back then when he was like really young, and he's just disillusioned himself a bit? You know, was he the key influencer in the big twist and what they were trying to do with Unit and everything, or was he influenced by someone else? You know, I do think there's a bit of like, you know, when he got spat on by the monster and everything, like so you just don't, you explained that away to yourself? Are you that crazy? And maybe he just is. Maybe that is the point, is that we literally cannot fathom the way he's convinced himself that was all some elaborate setup and just like, you know, it was just green paint or something like that. I'm like, how could you genuinely not believe that was like an actual thing? Like, that wasn't you and your friends playing a prank. Like, so there's a bit there I wish we had a bit more clarification on, of exactly when this heel turn with him happened. If there was a heel turn at all. I guess present-ish sort of day. He now has a podcast kind of dedicated to, you know, or inspired by his first meeting with the Doctor. He's been trying to get Unit on it for some time, and his latest guest who can tell us about the Doctor is, of course, Ruby Sunday. Millie Gibson is back in this episode, and my god, is Ruby so much better when she's not tied down by the stupid "my mum" arc. Thank god that's behind us and behind her, because, you know, I think she's just in this one episode, she's so much more interesting, and I feel like there's so much more depth to her. Maybe it's just Pete Mateague writing her, and, you know, maybe Pete Mateague just gets Ruby and, you know, has some interesting things to say with her character, which I feel like season 1 just didn't get to do. There's a little meet cute seemingly with Ruby and Conrad over this podcast, and, you know, he asks her out and things go from there. You know, the first 15-20 minutes of this episode is basically like a fan fiction of Conrad and Ruby seemingly being so perfect for each other. I didn't believe it, because they were trying so hard to make it seem quite cutesy, and, you know, when on the date and the camera's just like literally set up like this, and he's just like, oh, I just feel like I can tell you everything, Ruby. My mum died. You know, it was a bit like, so I was kind of thinking like, please don't let this be real, please. You know, I didn't want him to be a bad guy just because, you know, I want Ruby to be happy. But I still kind of wanted that to be the case, because, like, I can't take this seriously at face value. There's got to be something going on here. You haven't spent the first half of this episode just doing this for no reason. Although his line about, like, that wasn't the lucky day, I think that was today, smooth. I'd have gone on the date with him if he'd pulled that on me. The idea of exploring PTSD through Ruby and her dealing with, you know, everything she's kind of gone through in season 1. I also have been forever traumatized by space babies, so I get it. And yeah, I thought they did that really well. I thought it was quite well handled in this episode. Her kind of, you know, it's just adrenaline all this life with the Doctor, and then suddenly when that stops and she just has a moment of like, fuck, I fought the god of death. I watched the entire universe die. Like, I went through some shit, and I really like that they took the time to just do that, especially because I think Ruby just took everything in her stride in season 1, and that wasn't particularly interesting. The fact that it's now like, oh shit, like I have a problem with what I went through, and, you know, that's not an easy thing to kind of work through. I really liked that, and that's what makes the heel turn with Conrad so sad. And, like, I think she thought she had someone who could listen and would understand, and, you know, could help her maybe start to accept that and deal with it and process it. But no, he's a dickhead, so that was unfortunate. And I thought, you know, nice touch putting Millie back in the main title sequence as well. I've written a note here, fix that perception filter. I can't remember what I think that might have been to do with Conrad and just noticing the TARDIS. He's like, but maybe because he'd seen it once before, he just spotted it again. But normally it's like the thing where people just walk past a TARDIS, don't they? But he was like, actually like, oh my god. So maybe I just thought that was funny. But maybe because he's seen it before and he kind of knows what it was, he would notice it again. I don't know. And yeah, I just wrote Leather Monsters 2. Also, Midnight Creature. I think the Shriek are just a midnight entity, to be honest. The animation of when you first see the Shriek, it's like crawling along. It looked exactly like the animation of the Midnight Entity last week when it was like crawling. You just see it crawling like into the frame as the Doctor's running away from it. So I wonder if they like just use that asset and like reuse that, creature to be the Midnight Entity. I think that would make a lot of sense. So I thought that was kind of interesting. A glimpse of 15 and Ruby when they were still travelling together. I thought that was a nice little moment to see that, and obviously to just give Ncuti a bit more to do in the episode as well. So, getting some of that dynamic was nice. I do kind of wish, because apparently there's a 6-month gap in between Space Babies and The Devil's Cord, which is wild to me. I kind of wish it maybe had taken place then, but for some reason I have in my head that they mentioned something that means it can't have been then. It must have been after that. It must have, The Devil's Cord must have already happened, but maybe I'm wrong. But either way, it was nice to see a bit of a glimpse of that. And they weren't performing that to anyone. So how the hell did Conrad interpret that? And be like, well, that's not real. Does he believe that the Doctor's real? And how would he explain all that stuff away? That's what I just to understand how it can make logical sense to have this heel turn and this be his grand scheme. What is his podcast about? Is he just purposely playing a super long ass game with people, trying to, did Ruby not listen to that podcast and think, bloody hell, this guy's an arsehole? There's a few things like that I wish I had a bit more clarification on, because I'm surely people knew this guy was bad news, but I guess he's just hiding it almost for no reason for all this time. He had no idea that Ruby would come along and he would be able to seize that opportunity, so he's just doing this podcast until he dies. What was the plan there, sir? So I don't know about that, but it's fine. And yeah, I thought the concept of the Shriek were quite fun. The design of them was pretty basic but effective. I like that they kind of mark a victim to hunt them a year later, because they're an interdimensional sort of deal or something like that. I did really enjoy that. I put, Ruby and Conrad are quite sweet. I mean, they were then, but, obviously Conrad was not being genuine. But I thought Millie and Jonah had really good chemistry. I thought they bounced off together really nicely, which also just makes the heel turn really sad, even sadder. But, they just kind of do the cutesy coupley things. They kind of getting to know each other and kind of, developing feelings for each other and stuff like that. Well, one-sided, I guess, as it turns out. That was all very well and good, and I did think the camera work when they were on the date, when they were just it was directly on his face when he was talking to her. I was like, oh god, this is a bit come on, this is a bit tropey, isn't it? But purposeful. It's obviously purposeful, because they want you to it wants to present itself as this idealised, perfect relationship, because they know what's coming. So yeah, Ruby coping with life after the Doctor I thought was really nice. And Kate Stewart. Is this the best Kate Stewart has ever been? Yes. Pete McTeague should write Kate Stewart all the time. I loved her in this episode. Obviously, I like Kate Stewart anyway, but God, Kate was brilliant in this one. The scene with her and Ruby when they're just having a chat on the phone, and Kate's just willing to drop everything for Ruby, even though Curl Ibrahim's also there with her. They're not even trying with that romance. It's just there. I don't care about it, but it's fine. But yeah, I just thought it was a really sweet scene with those two on the phone, and Kate trying to be really reassuring, and I can send a team there if you are worried about something going wrong. And I think it's a really relatable thing that Ruby's surely something's going to go wrong, even if the Doctor's not around. And she's very much proven right ultimately. So all that stuff is really nice, and just Kate was such a badass with Conrad. The way she just, I know I'm skipping ahead a bit, but oh my god, she was so good. Just how ruthless she was. I'm well, if this is what you believe, Conrad, if this is all fake, then deal with that. Then she just sets this creature on him. Amazing. I think it's fair that they had a little moment where Colonel Ibrahim was like, you went too far with that. She was like, he's fine, isn't he? I just love that ruthlessness, because I think the Brigadier had that at times. The Doctor and the Brig had these disagreements, at the end of the introduction of the Silurians, that first story that they were in. the Brigadier takes some ruthless actions and the Doctor outright does not approve of it and they disagree over it. And I liked that we got a glimpse of that, a glimpse of her father in Kate in a really badass way. Because it was so satisfying to see that smug look wiped off Conrad's face. But then he's still just so like, oh, your CGI's gotten better, innit? I'm like, oh my god, you're such a frustrating human. But you know, people will explain away anything to fit their own narrative, I suppose. Even though it's just wild. But I loved Kate doing that. I thought it was badass and hilarious and brilliant and so satisfying. Even though ultimately, I guess Conrad still didn't really believe it, but I guess he does now because he did get a chunk taken out of his arm and he's got like a weird. I don't know if like the entire forearm now is just like a fake arm or if it's just like they've put a metal band around there for some reason. I don't really know what that is, but I have a feeling we're going to see him again and they can explore it in that. It's probably like an Auton hand or something. But yeah, Kate Stewart was amazing in this episode. The way she like, when Conrad points the gun at Ruby and she just stands in front like, don't you dare point that gun at her. Oh my god, I got chills when she said that. Gemma Redgrave delivered that so well. Yeah, it's just an amazing episode for Kate. You know, I don't really care about a lot of the new unit lot. It was nice to see Shirley again because we haven't seen her since the giggle. But again, I just feel like she was just sort of there. And this, like, the new guy, the obvious inside man was so obvious. They drew so much attention to him right at the start. They keep trying to make him happen in the episode. And then they're like, oh, what if there's an inside man at unit? And like, that's the only way that Conrad could possibly get in. And you're like, it's so obviously this guy. You're supposed to, maybe you should be shut down. Maybe people should be doubting you because your security is horrible. You're hiring 14-year-olds or 13-year-olds and giving them weaponized things to shoot at. You know, you're employing literally anyone who walks past. Kate's like, I'm sniffing for a worker. You should work for UNIT. I think we could use you. I do think this new version of UNIT is a bit of a shambles. And you know, I'm not a huge fan of. I mean, not a huge fan. I'm just kind of indifferent to like the Vlinks and stuff. I'm like, I just don't care. But Kate Stewart, yes, she was amazing in this one. And yeah, I liked that they just explained like, oh, Mel's she's away investigating something else. It's fine. We'll see her in the finale, I expect. She was in the trailer for this season, wasn't she? I'm not making that up. I feel like we saw her in the trailer. So she must be turning up in the finale. This is Kate Stewart at her best as a character, I think, in this episode, and I'm hoping we continue down that sort of maybe morally grey sort of line. Because again, the Doctor kind of not just getting along with everyone in his life, even if he has a group of friends, he doesn't necessarily have to agree with them all the time. And I feel like with this era, it's just always so easy with the Doctor and his allies until Belinda came along. So if we keep going down this direction with Kate and they kind of butt heads a lot more, that'd be great. Because I thought we were kind of starting that in The Legend of Ruby Sunday when that guy died, but obviously it got undone. Because the Doctor was like, oh no, when they were in the time window thing, like, oh, check this out. And Kate was like, you told people not to move. And then he dies. And Kate just seems so fucking furious with him. And then it's completely forgotten and it's all fine. So maybe there'll be actual like tension and consequences this time. One can only hope. But yeah, I put, Conrad, you idiot. When he was like, I didn't take the antidote, Ruby. Because, he was targeted by, the Shriek, and he kind of plays it off as like, I just wanted to prove that I can be like the Doctor and I can be a hero too, because I'm the best, I'm Conrad, I'm handsome. And obviously at the time I was like, surely no one's that stupid. No one is that fucking dumb. Especially his friend Sparky with his stupid Sparky hat. I was like, that's such a stupid hat. That's obviously going to come back into play, and obviously they do stumble across it a bit later on. But yeah, when he was like that, I was like, buddy, you are an evil man, aren't you? We're going to get the twist now. So it's kind of feeling like we're probably about halfway through the episode, and then yeah, we get the heel turn. But yeah, Ruby's hanging out with Conrad and his mates. She's kind of nervous that something might be going wrong, and struggling with that, and Conrad seems to be being nice about it, but obviously then the Shriek apparently attack. I loved, there were set photos of those guys in what ultimately is the Shrike Queen Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., the Shriek costumes. And people were complaining, being like, oh, they just look like men in rubber suits, they look so bad. But again, they'd be like Conrad, wouldn't they, and just explain it away and say, well, it still looked bad and it could have been better. And, how did they know if they don't believe in the Shriek? How do they know exactly what they look like and stuff like that? And, which I guess is a kind of a good point, but ignore that. But yeah, just the dun-dun-dun reveal, like, Conrad, I'm doing my villain voice now, you've caught me in my evil plan. This, like, Hans from Frozen ass bloody villain reveal twist. Man. So, I was glad that this kind of gained some momentum in the episode, because, I was enjoying the first half, but I was kind of feeling like, I want something to happen now. I'm not gonna, like, if I rewatch this episode, I'm not gonna be like, oh, I can't wait to watch the first half of this episode again, So, I was kind of like, okay, I get it, it's sweet, let's get on with it. So when we had this heel turn, I was like, yes. And I think they explored this kind of really nicely and fully. And I can't explain it, because sometimes there's like a big heel turn in a story like this. It just goes completely new direction to what was originally being set up. And a lot of the time that doesn't work for me. Like Fugitive of the Jadoon is just too much of a like whiplash for me, and I'm like, oh, it's become a completely different episode, and I'm not sure I enjoyed that. Same for 73 Yards. It just becomes like a political thriller for the second half. I'm like, I much preferred what you were doing in the first half of this episode. I've kind of checked out. But this one, for some reason, this does just work. It feels a bit more grounded. And I guess because in hindsight, the first half of the episode is like wow, that's very different to what is going on, like what's actually going on here, and what's like feels grounded for the episode. So I guess that maybe is a bit more why it works. And yeah, we get a really fun reveal that Conrad is a dick, and he's been, secretly running, like... Sorry, I just got a notification on my phone that Lando Norris just won the Formula 1 race, and that makes me very happy. So this is my lucky day, everyone. And yeah, I like the reveal that he's just been completely disillusioned almost, and he's spreading all this misinformation. He doesn't believe that UNIT is real and that aliens threats are real, and then it's like, oh, it's just a waste of government money. And to be fair, did they need that big ass tower? I'm probably not. Yeah, let him cook. No, don't actually let him cook, he's a dick. But yeah, I think UNIT probably should just go back to being a bit more covert after this. It kind of bit them in the arse a bit, didn't it? This, they reveal all this in their live streaming, like, see, it's just all a waste of money, and I've been manipulating Ruby all this time to get information. And like, what did you actually really glean though? That's, you already didn't believe it, so now you still just don't believe it. What have you gained from this? I mean, if I were dating Ruby, I would completely change my ways. I'd be like, I believe in anything you bloody say. So, Conrad and I would not get on. I do not relate. But, I did like this twist, and what this episode has to say about disinformation I thought was all too relevant. Very purposeful kind of topic to explore, which I liked. So yeah, some relevant real-time commentary. Because it's just getting worse and worse, isn't it? I do think the messaging gets a bit muddled at times, because I also feel like they present Conrad and... I can't even remember the stupid name he called his movement. All those kind of people. They're kind of presented almost in the way... they reminded me of the Just Stop Oil protesters. And I don't think it necessarily takes a stance on that, obviously, because I don't think that's a direct comparison, but it almost felt like it was presented that way, because they're like protesting this thing, and it's almost like villainizing those protesters, and I didn't know how I felt about that. So I do feel like the commentary got a bit muddled in what it was trying to say one thing, but then presented it as a different thing. But as a topic, the disinformation thing I think really, really works. I don't know if as many people would believe Conrad as they did, because Conrad's basically, he's a handsome Andrew Tate, isn't he? That's what they're going for with this. And just this world of misinformation. And, when they're... Because, we know the government's shit in real life, and spending money on things it shouldn't be spending money on, mainly their own salaries. But, nothing happens, nothing changes, nothing can be done about that. So I didn't necessarily buy into like how big this movement got, certainly not how fast this movement got big. But when there are people like Andrew Tate and Donald Trump and Elon Musk in the world spreading all this misinformation, you know, and they do have big rallying cries of support around them, I can still swallow it. I don't know if I necessarily felt the public reaction to this was what it could be and would have been, but you know, it's Doctor Who. It's, I guess, you know, it's a fictional story. So, you know, I definitely feel like there is a world where it could get this bad. I feel like maybe we needed to see that happen over a longer period of time. You know, people are starting to question UNIT and, you know, should it even be a thing? Why is it getting all this money? And, you know, is it all just a fake conspiracy thing, you know, or just all these conspiracy theorists who, you know, think the earth is flat and COVID didn't actually happen. Really deep and rich commentary, and I think they did explore that in a very nice, no, not nice, an appropriate way for Doctor Who to explore that concept. You know, a family-friendly exploration of that concept, and disinformation and everything. I thought that was really good, because it's so frustrating to watch people get like swayed by this, and like, how can you be so stupid that you actually believe that, you know, UNIT isn't doing what it's actually doing? Like, again, I do think it's kind of foggy into like what Conrad does believe and how he interpreted different things. I kind of wish there was a bit more explanation for that, but maybe there just is no explaining it, and that's what it is. But also, it just means the writer doesn't have to explain it, so I'm kind of like, yeah, I'm kind of mixed on some of the execution of it, but the idea behind it's really good and really interesting, and especially because we're almost certainly seeing Conrad again in the finale. I don't really mind that, because things might get a bit more explained and delved into there, because I'm assuming we're getting a 2-part finale this year. So, you know, this might just be... This is very much a finale set episode. You know, it's like the long game to Bad Wolf Parting of the Ways, except this was good. But yeah, all that's going on. Kate is being an absolute badass once Conrad infiltrates Unit HQ with the obvious inside man. And he's just saying all this nonsense stuff about, you know, I mean, he's just like a big misogynistic, misconstrued monster. And yeah, Kate kind of shows him up essentially, but he still just can't admit, like, you know, he was wrong. And he's like, you know, it comes down to the pettiness that he tried to get into UNIT years ago, and he got rejected. So, you know, it definitely comes from that sort of resentment building up, I think. So I think it is necessary. I think he does believe in, you know, what UNIT's doing and all that sort of thing. But I think he's just a petty little weasel of a man. And I think that's probably, you know, what they're saying. I do think they kind of give that as an explanation. But, you know, I think there is some kind of muddy waters into regards to the execution of it, I suppose, ultimately. But I really liked everything with, you know, Kate releasing the shriek, just going, just chomping on him, hilarious. So I liked all of that. I forgot to mention like Ruby's family. We obviously saw, you know, her birth mother, her mum, and her gran again, very briefly, but it was nice to see them. It was nice to see Louise was actually getting along really well with Carla, and the gran. What's the gran's name? I don't know. Yolandi from EastEnders. You know, they had a few funny moments together. It was nice to see that family unit's still going strong and they can be there for Ruby. I do wish there was maybe a bit more of them, particularly after the twist reveal. I feel like they kind of just glossed over that side of things. But I guess that's the 45-minute format for you, isn't it? But still, nice to see that they're still ongoing. And, you know, that's showing us a development in that relationship rather than Ruby just stood there being like, and, you know, my family are doing well and, you know, they're getting along great with my birth mother and everything. But yeah, Conrad's kind of then locked up somewhere and he's teleported onto the TARDIS by the Doctor. One of the best scenes of the episode, I think, this. Ncuti was great in this scene. I thought Jonah was great in the scene as well. This is why I'm really hopeful that we are going to see Conrad again. Not just because of the misses for the bit, but I think those two facing off was really good and really effective. gave me sort of school reunion-esque vibes with the Doctor and Mr. Finch at the swimming pool. I feel like 15's really coming into his own now. I loved him just getting so pissed off at Conrad and just calling all his bullshit out was so satisfying. And then it's kind of a bit tampered with Conrad being like, I reject your reality. Just a bit too on the nose and a bit too like, okay, here we go. Where that's going is intriguing, because at first I thought, when they were talking about, if units like liquidized or shut down or whatever, and people get hold of their assets, I think Kate mentions like, it could tear the planet apart. And I was like, is that what happens to the planet? I'll be getting an explanation now to why the Earth's gone. But I don't think that necessarily is the case. That might still be the case, but it seemed like they were presenting that as like, that's what it's going to be, and then it didn't happen. Crisis averted for now. But that might still be where this is going, I don't know. But, getting some hints like that is interesting. Sends him back to his cell, but not without first Conrad revealing Belinda Chandra's name to the Doctor. And we realise that this is who the Doctor got Belinda's name from. And then off he goes investigating, and the robot revolution happens and brings us up to here. So I love that we've got answers already about, who gave the Doctor Belinda's name. I'm assuming that is, where that came from, because he didn't recognise the name, so it obviously was in the past. So I loved that. I love that they also resisted the temptation to not have the Doctor and Ruby kind of meet again in like the present day of this episode. So I imagine when we see Ruby again in what I assume will be the finale, that's where we can have like a proper present day reunion for the Doctor and Ruby. I like that they resisted temptation to do that too quickly. And then Mrs. Flood comes along. It's your lucky day. I do kind of wish they'd start changing it up, because the last 3 episodes now have all ended with Mrs. Flood being right at the end. I do kind of wish they'd change it up a bit and maybe have her in different sort of places, because they're doing the Susan Twist thing again basically, but I liked in like 73 Yards where Susan Twist's in it quite near the start when she's like the hiker lady, rather than just always popping up at the end. Like when Missy was showing up in Series 8 as well, like Into the Daleks, she shows up about halfway through. Things like that. I think they should maybe change it up a bit more. I hope they do. I'm still not particularly bothered about Mrs. Flood, but I do think her letting Conrad out and basically confirming, I think that we'll be seeing him again in the finale. What is her plan? What is this lady's deal? What does she need him specifically for? I think we're going to be dropping a lot of that now until the 2-part finale. And we'll see where it leads. But we've got like 2 sort of more standard run-of-the-mill affairs, I think, coming up in the next couple of weeks, and then we get to the finale. I am excited to be back with the Doctor and Belinda, because, I did kind of miss Belinda's presence in this episode, and, getting a Doctor Light, 2 Doctor Light episodes last season was kind of out of necessity for Ncuti's schedule. So I wasn't actually expecting them to have another sort of Doctor Light one this series. But they did. And, I'm kind of missing Ncuti's presence as well, which is why I was really glad we did get that confrontation with him and Conrad at the end. This was a really, really, really good episode again. I liked the idea of the Shriek. I liked the heel turn with Conrad, and the fact that I think I wouldn't like it as much if he wasn't coming back in the finale. And I'm assuming he is. If he doesn't, I'll be surprised and a bit annoyed, because this would kind of feel like a waste of time if we don't see more of Conrad. But it's definitely kind of building towards something with Mrs. Flood and him mentioning reality and everything. So, I thought the first half of the episode, I thought, it was fine. It was a good reintroduction to Ruby. I really liked what they were doing with her PTSD and exploring that. So that was nice. Like, it feels like Ruby actually has something to say with her character and something to explore with her character. The whole kind of overall series arc, I'm getting more and more intrigued by each week. So I'm getting my hopes up. Basically, I'm in danger of getting my hopes up, but I'm trying to keep my expectations low. But yeah, I liked the first half, fine, and then the heel turn, all the commentary on disinformation, I thought was really nicely explored with Conrad and his group of idiot friends. Kate Stewart was the MVP of this episode for me. This was her best episode, I think, by far. She was superb in this one, like absolute star. The ending confrontation with the Doctor and Conrad was great. So we've got a few answers about the overall series arc and mystery, some clarification on things. I do think there was a bit of things getting muddled along the way in regards to Conrad's journey. Why was he holding some of his true intentions back? It doesn't really make sense for him to pretend to be something he's not. And just hoping it works out for him, that he can do like a da-da-da reveal. So, I think if you think about that a bit too much, it probably does fall apart at the seams a bit. But I love the messages they kind of were exploring in this one and the themes. And it was great to see Ruby again and her family. And I think she was probably at her best now that whole story arc is done from season 1. And yeah, I'm excited to see where that's going to be leading. It's just so nice that this first half of the season has just been really, really strong. As long as they keep this up, I think this could be one of the most solid seasons that we've had for New Who. So that could be exciting. We're definitely on the right path, I think. That is going to be everything. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Let me know your thoughts down below. And how you're feeling about the giant spidery thing in the next time trailer for next week. Gross. I have no idea what the next episode is going to be about, and that's exciting. So yeah, that's everything I have to say. And I will see you when I see you.